So Silksong's got an all-time peak player count on Steam of 587,150, which is really cool. Congrats. However, some of the so-called modern audience are actually very upset at Silksong. At the lower part of this tweet, we can see this account Stealth saying, many indie developers are delaying their games to get out of Hollow Knight Silksong's way. They had marketing plans which now have to be changed because of something they couldn't anticipate. This Joseph person says, I think Silksong's 2-week PR push has done some damage to other indie studios. I don't think Team Cherry thought about the impact this game would have on other indies in their marketing. I think that's a bummer that I hope isn't replicated, to be honest. Wario64 tweeted, Baby Steps is the latest game to move its release date because of Silksong from September 8th to September 23rd. And this FaceTime account saying, I can't be the only person who thinks it's kind of messed up for Silksong to reveal its release date so late. Like, man, you're indie developers. You should understand the struggle that studios go through. And then we've got this account Strife saying, by the way, Team Cherry absolutely had the responsibility of giving a heads up about the release of Silksong and accommodating other indie devs in regards to it. Art isn't made in a vacuum, and as indie devs, they absolutely should know how hard it is for other indie devs to be visible. And some gaming journalist article titled, Is Hollow Knight Silksong's cheap price a problem for other indie games? Devs and publishers weigh up its impact. It's a very odd thing. I mean, indie devs should be celebrating the success of Silksong, not complaining about it. And to be fair, there have been lots of devs congratulating Silksong. However, clearly, some aren't. And instead, they're insulting Silksong and the devs who worked on it. And it comes off like immense jealousy. And like they're just trying to muddy the waters of the indie scene, really, because over recent years, we've seen indie games becoming beacons of light for gamers in an industry that's otherwise infested with corrupt AAA greed. Artur, the dev behind the indie series Soul Ash, would give his thoughts. We can see him saying here, some devs have become dependent on press, experts, publishers, conferences, awards, and a network of corporate friendships, and it shows. In other words, some of them are apparently selling out to the very AAA corpos that have pushed gamers away and more into the indie scene to begin with. He would go on to say, many independents are still trying to preserve the meaning of the indie dev term, but it's being divided and conquered by larger interests. Which takes us to Madame Savvy, who responded to Permaband in the tweet that we had on screen a moment ago. And she says the reason why this happens is because a lot of quote-unquote indie games and companies are captured. They play by the rules set forth by DI groups so they can be rewarded. Silksong's team didn't do that. They did their own thing. Anyone can release anytime for any price with zero notice. The individuals outing themselves with that language most likely have some interesting connections to industry capture crews. Now, ultimately, I think most indie devs, and when I say most, I mean like 99% or so, by far pretty much all of them, are still very cool, hardworking people. But it is concerning that there's a very small fraction who are apparently willing to sell out to corporate interests and do what they can to subvert the indie genre. But let me know what you think about all this stuff in the comments. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend, and consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed my coverage. Helps out greatly. I appreciate it. See you in the comments here and in the next one.